At my daughter's wedding, she placed the glass in my hand herself. Her fingers lingered just a moment too long on the stem, her eyes darting toward the guests before fixing on me. I lifted it slowly, the chandelier light bouncing off the rim, when my wife's grip clamped around my wrist. Her nails dug in, sharp. "Sip! Don't swallow!" she hissed, her voice shaking like she knew something I didn't. The sound of 200 voices filled the hall, clapping, cheering, shouting toasts that drowned out my own heartbeat. But I couldn't unsee it. My daughter's smile too wide, her breath caught, as if she were waiting for something. The glass touched my lip and trembled there. Had she really looked at me that way? Or was it just the flicker of light tricking me? I lowered it, pretending, letting a single drop slide across my tongue. Bitter, metallic, not wine. Wrong. I forced a smile to mask the twitch in my jaw. She leaned forward then, her bouquet brushing my chest, and whispered so close I felt her breath. "Drink it, Father. Everyone's watching." My hand shook, not from age but from the chill in her words. I tilted the glass, but let the liquid slide only against my teeth. No further. My wife's hand tightened again, harder this time, as if her small bones were stronger than my whole arm. The music swelled, and I swallowed nothing. Then I saw it. When the toast ended, she slipped something, small, metallic, back into her purse. A glint under the lace flap, too quick for the others, but not for me. My stomach turned colder than the glass in my hand. What had she been hiding? I set the glass down on the tablecloth, careful not to spill, and caught the red imprint of my lip against the rim. I wanted to wipe it away, erase the proof, but my wife pulled me closer. "Not here, not now," she murmured, her voice cracked. But if not here, when? Every cheer sounded like mockery. Every clap echoed like a hammer against my skull. I thought of the clock above the band. It read 8:37. My mind counted the hours left until midnight, a number pressing down on my chest. What would happen by then? What deadline had already been set in motion? I shifted in my chair, the fabric of my suit rough against my neck. My daughter moved from table to table, laughing, hugging, always glancing back at me. Her dress shimmered under the lights, white like innocence, but my tongue still burned with bitterness. Why had she done this? My wife tried to distract me with chatter about flowers, music, cousins I hadn't seen in years, but all I saw was the purse on her arm, swinging with every step. A purse too heavy for a wedding night, bulging slightly at the side. What was inside? When I finally dared to rise, someone else stopped me. My new son-in-law, face calm but eyes sharp. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, the weight pressing me back down into the chair. "Stay seated, Father. Tonight, you smile, or this family will not survive tomorrow." The coldness in his palm seeped into my skin. He squeezed once, as if sealing the command into my flesh. The guests roared again, oblivious, raising glasses, singing, dancing. And I, frozen, trapped in a seat of honor that felt more like a cage. I glanced at the stage, saw the clock again, ticking toward 9. My wife's hand slid over mine under the table, trembling. She whispered, "Don't fight it tonight. Please." I didn't answer. My throat was too dry, my heart too loud. When dessert arrived, I pushed the plate away untouched. My daughter's eyes met mine across the room, her expression unreadable, like a mask she had practiced. She tilted her head slowly, silently asking me why I hadn't obeyed, and I had no answer. The violin struck a sour note then, strings snapping mid-song, and for a moment the entire hall stilled. My daughter flinched, her hand clutching the purse tight against her side. I saw the panic flicker there, real and unguarded, and I knew something inside was not meant to be seen. I rose suddenly, my chair scraping against the marble. A few heads turned, curious, annoyed at the disruption. My son-in-law appeared again, blocking my path with a smile too polished to be kind. "Leaving already?" His voice low, his breath heavy with wine. I forced a half-smile, shaking my head. "Just air," I said. The lie slid easily, though my chest burned. He stepped aside, but not far, his eyes locked on me until I disappeared toward the doors. The corridor outside smelled of roses and dust, a mixture from abandoned bouquets and old curtains. My steps echoed louder than the music behind me. I reached for the coat room door, hesitated, then let my hand drop. Did I dare look inside her purse? Did I dare confirm the fear clawing my throat? A laugh erupted behind me. I turned sharply, but it was only the staff at the bar, whispering, pointing. One of them muttered, "Police check the bottles tomorrow at 10. My stomach clenched. So there was a deadline, a real one. 10 o'clock. Tomorrow. I pressed my palm against the wall, the plaster cool under my skin, grounding me. For a second, I imagined collapsing there, letting the secret eat me alive. But no, I couldn't. I needed to know what she had poured, what she had planned, why she had wanted me silenced. The door creaked as I pushed it open, stepping back into the hall, the noise crashing over me like a wave. My daughter was gone from the dance floor. Only her purse remained, resting carelessly on a chair near the wall. Unzipped. Waiting. I stood frozen, every eye in the room a potential witness. My chest rose and fell, my hand hovering near the strap. The music swelled again, covering my hesitation. My wife's voice cut through the crowd. "Don't do it here!" But I couldn't move away either. The purse seemed to glow under the chandelier, its contents hidden, its secrets heavy. My fingers twitched. My breath caught. And as the seconds stretched, the only thought in my mind was this: if I didn't look now, would I survive the night at all? So I leaned down, closer, close enough to smell the faint trace of chemicals, sharp, unnatural, leaking from the open flap. My heart stopped. And that was when a hand clamped hard over mine, forcing it shut around the strap. A voice whispered against my ear, "Too close, too cruel." "Not yet, Father." Midnight. The grip released as quickly as it came, and when I turned, she was already walking back into the hall. My daughter, white dress trailing behind her like a ghost, never looking back. I stared at my hand still clutching the purse strap, my knuckles white, veins raised. The chemical sting clung to my nose, sharper now that I had touched it. I wanted to wash it off, scrub until skin bled. But I stayed still, rooted. I forced myself back into the party, masking the tremor in my step. Laughter hit me like shards of glass, cutting with every cheer, every shout of joy. I found my seat again, the glass still waiting, the bitter red stain drying against the rim. Everyone lifted their drinks once more, oblivious. I stared at mine, and the taste returned, metallic, clinging to memory. How could I still feel it when I had swallowed nothing? My son-in-law leaned over, pressing his knee against mine beneath the table. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "You'll play along," he whispered, voice low, hidden by the clinking silverware. "Or tomorrow, you lose more than your pride." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, appetite gone. What else could they take from me that hadn't already been stripped piece by piece? My home? My name? My blood? The clock above the band ticked loudly, hands inching closer to 9. My wife noticed my stare and tried to block it with her hand, shaking her head. Her lips trembled, but her voice came steady. "Pretend." "Please!" I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but the weight of the hall pressed me silent. Everyone watching, everyone waiting for the father of the bride to smile, to bless, to approve. I excused myself again, muttering about the bathroom, and slipped away. The corridor stretched long and empty, muffled music seeping through the walls. A stained napkin lay discarded on a side table, red blotches dark and sticky. My stomach churned. I picked it up without thinking, the paper rough against my fingers, the smell unmistakable, iron, sour. Blood, not wine. Whose? I shoved it into my pocket, heart thundering. The silence out here seemed heavier, broken only by the muffled bass of the band. Every sound made me twitch, the squeak of a waiter's shoes, the clang of cutlery being cleared. But no one else seemed to care about the napkin, the glass, the chemical reek. Only me. Why only me? Back in the hall, my daughter was laughing too loudly, her hands too animated as she gestured to the guests. Every movement rehearsed, every glance checking for my reaction. I felt like prey, cornered, while she danced in circles around me. Did she want me dead? Humiliated? Erased? Or was this something darker? Something not even she fully controlled? The wineglass still waited at my place, gleaming. I touched it with one finger, the rim cold, damp. My wife leaned close, her whisper barely air. "They'll test the bar at 10 tomorrow." She wouldn't look at me when she said it. 10 tomorrow. The words echoed like a sentence past. Was that my deadline? Their trap? Or my salvation? A burst of laughter shook the room, the kind that carries cruelty under its surface. I followed the sound, and found 3 staff huddled together, pointing, whispering. One muttered, "Imagine the scandal if they find out." My ears burned. Were they speaking about me? About her? I wanted to demand clarity, but cowardice held my tongue still. The bitterness rose again in my mouth, phantom but real, choking. I coughed hard, too hard, and heads turned. My daughter froze mid-step, eyes slicing toward me. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped. Her smile cracked, her jaw clenched, and her hand darted to the purse at her side. Panic, pure and raw, before she covered it with laughter again. I dabbed my mouth with the napkin from the table, hiding the tremor. My son-in-law returned to my side, leaning down as if sharing a joke. His words were knives. "Tomorrow at 10, Father. Don't miss it." His cologne suffocated, too sweet, covering something rotten beneath. I clenched the napkin in my fist, every muscle aching to strike him. But I stayed silent. For now, the hall blurred as if smoke had filled the air. I saw only shapes, heard only fragments, music, laughter, footsteps. My chest tightened, breath shallow. The red napkin burned in my pocket. The glass gleamed before me. The purse swung at her side. Objects chained to secrets, each demanding to be opened, each whispering its own threat. I rose once more, forcing strength into my limbs, and made my way outside. The air hit me cold, sharp, almost cleansing. But even here, the taste remained, lodged in my mouth, like rust. I spat onto the pavement, the dark stain spreading under the streetlight. No relief. The poison wasn't in the glass, it was already in me. I staggered back toward the hall, gripping the wall for balance, the brick rough under my palm. Through the window, I saw her silhouette, laughing, glowing, admired, and I wondered, was she celebrating her marriage, or my funeral yet to come? The door creaked behind me, heavy footsteps crossing the stone. I turned, my heart hammering, expecting my wife. But the shadow was broader, heavier, carrying something under his arm. My son-in-law's voice cut the night. "You should have finished the drink, Father." He stepped out of the darkness like a figure carved from ice, his face calm but eyes hard. The streetlight caught the contract in his hand, folded neatly as if already prepared for my signature. He held it out with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the paper fluttering slightly in the night breeze. "One stroke of your pen, and this family stays intact," he said. My stomach twisted. The words weren't an offer. They were a sentence. I stared at the document, my pulse hammering in my ears louder than the band inside. His hand brushed mine, forcing the paper against my palm, the cold touch of his skin making me recoil. "It's only business," he added, his tone soft, almost gentle, but with the weight of a knife pressed at my ribs. I felt myself shrink, anger swallowed by fear. What had my daughter signed me into? The pages smelled faintly of ink and damp paper, but under that, I swore I caught the same sharp chemical scent from her purse. My chest tightened, every object tied together, each clue circling the other, leading back to her. I wanted to throw the contract in his face, but instead, I folded it carefully, slipping it into my jacket. My silence was the only shield I had left. He leaned closer, his breath warm and suffocating against my cheek. "Stay quiet tonight, or tomorrow the house is gone." The house, the only thing left of my parents, the place where every memory of childhood still lived in the walls. My knees almost buckled at the thought of losing it, as though the ground beneath me had already been sold. How could a man threaten history so casually? I tried to speak, but my throat closed around the words. "Why me?" was all that escaped, a whisper more than a question. He chuckled low, mocking. "Because you matter less than you think." His hand clapped my shoulder, heavy, rehearsed, sealing the humiliation into my skin. For the first time that night, I felt old, smaller than the man I had believed myself to be. The band inside struck up a faster tune, violins sharp and relentless. I could almost imagine the sound was a warning, strings pulled until they snapped. My daughter's laugh carried through the open window, brittle, forced, echoing like a dare. Was she a pawn, like me, or had she chosen this path freely? The doubt tore me apart, worse than certainty ever could. I walked away from him, my steps uneven, shoes scraping against stone. The night air cooled my sweat, but my body trembled all the same. I thought of locking myself in the bathroom, burning the contract, screaming until someone believed me. But each idea died quickly, crushed by the deadline hanging over tomorrow's morning. 10 o'clock. Police at the bar. My house on the line. Which would destroy me first? Inside, the hall swirled with light and laughter. But it all looked different now. Darker. Every smile seemed false. Every cheer a mockery. My wife caught my eye from across the room, her expression unreadable. She touched 2 fingers to her lips, then to her heart, as if begging me to hold steady. I wanted to believe her faith could protect us, but the paper in my jacket burned hotter than any fire. I sat again, forcing my breathing to slow, forcing my hands not to shake. My daughter approached, bouquet in hand, roses pressed too close to my face. Their perfume filled my nose, thick and suffocating. She bent down, whispering in my ear, "You look pale, Father. Maybe you should have another drink." Her voice was silk, wrapped around steel, and the roses cut deeper than any thorn. I clenched my fists under the table, nails biting into my palms until I felt the sting. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my words trembling but clear enough. She smiled sweetly for the guests, never breaking character, and whispered back, "Because you let me." Then she straightened, twirling away, her dress catching the light like shattered glass. My chest tightened, every beat an accusation. The weight of the contract grew unbearable. I wanted to pull it out, wave it in the air, shout the truth until the chandeliers shattered. But I imagined the laughter, the disbelief, the humiliation of being called senile, paranoid, drunk. That was the cost they had set for me. Silence or shame. Both tasted bitter. And I couldn't choose. Not yet. A waiter passed, dropping cutlery onto a tray with a clang that rang too loud, too sharp. It jolted me back to the present, back to the decision I refused to make. My son-in-law lingered by the bar, watching, his patience as dangerous as his threats. My daughter danced with another guest, eyes flicking back to me every few seconds, like a hawk circling prey. I reached for water, anything to clear the taste from my mouth, but even it seemed tainted. Every swallow felt heavy, poisoned by suspicion. My wife touched my hand under the table, her skin warm, fragile, trembling. "Don't sign," she mouthed silently. I wanted to promise her I wouldn't, but the words stuck. How could I promise what I wasn't sure I had the strength to resist? The music dimmed, candles flickering as waiters cleared tables. Midnight loomed closer, heavy as stone. I glanced again at the contract in my pocket, at the purse dangling from her chair, at the glass still half full on the table. Each object a chain, each one demanding surrender. I closed my eyes, but there was no escape. Not in silence, not in thought, not in faith. Then the violin cut off mid-note, the string snapping again, harsh and sudden. All heads turned. The music died. And in that silence, my niece's voice trembled behind me. "Uncle!" It was her who... She stopped. I felt the roses brush my shoulder again. My daughter had returned, standing right there, listening. Anna's voice broke off like a string snapped mid-bow, sharp and sudden. I turned, heart hammering, and saw her eyes wide, frozen, lips trembling with words unsaid. My daughter stood just behind me, roses brushing my arm, the perfume drowning every other smell. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her stare was enough, cold as stone, pressing Anna into silence. Anna's hand clutched mine under the table, fingers icy and desperate. "Later," she mouthed, though her lips barely moved. I wanted to squeeze her hand back, to anchor her, to let her know she wasn't alone. But fear bound me tighter than ropes ever could. My daughter leaned closer, her smile practiced for the crowd, whispering, "Family should never gossip." The words dripped into my ear, soft but edged with blade. I flinched, but no one noticed. The hall erupted in applause for some speech I couldn't hear, the noise rising like a shield around our small, dangerous silence. My daughter's bouquet brushed my chest again as she pulled away, leaving behind the stifling sweetness of roses and the tremor in my bones. Anna slipped from her chair, face pale, eyes lowered. She vanished into the crowd, swallowed by sequins, music, and wine. I wanted to follow, but my son-in-law stepped into view, blocking the path with effortless timing. His smile was sharp, his words sharper. "Sit, father. It's not your turn to dance." His hand clamped my shoulder, and I sank back into the chair, humiliated. The laughter around us felt cruel, though none of it was meant for me. Every cheer for the bride and groom echoed like mockery in my ears. I raised the glass of water, but my hand shook so badly the rim clinked against my teeth. My wife steadied it for me, her touch firm despite her trembling fingers. She whispered, "Wait until morning. The truth will come." Morning, 10 o'clock. The deadline beat in my head like a drum. But how could I wait, when Anna knew something, when her words had been cut short? I could still feel the urgency in her grip, the terror in her half-sentence. My throat ached with the weight of unfinished truth. Silence had become a weapon, and it was tearing us apart. I pushed my chair back suddenly, the scrape loud against the marble, earning stares. My daughter turned, watching, her smile faltering for just a second. I forced a smile of my own, pretending to head toward the bar. My legs carried me not to the drinks, but toward the hallway where Anna had disappeared. My heart pounded with each step, fearing she'd already been taken from reach. The hallway smelled of dust and candle wax, dim and narrow, the air cooler than inside. Shadows stretched long, broken only by the flicker of a single wall sconce. I found her near the end, pressed against the wall, clutching her hands tight to her chest. Her lips parted when she saw me, relief flashing across her face, but her eyes darted nervously behind me. "Uncle, please!" I reached for her, desperate. Tell me now." My voice was rough, low, urgent. She glanced past me, shaking her head, tears forming. "It was her who—" And then her words died again, strangled by the sound of heels clicking hard against the floor. My daughter's figure appeared, a vision in white, her shadow stretching tall and merciless toward us. Anna's body stiffened, pressed flat against the wall. My daughter approached slowly, bouquet dangling now, petals crushed from her grip. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her tone honeyed but her eyes sharp. I forced a smile, too wide, too thin. Anna wasn't feeling well. I came to check. My daughter tilted her head, studied us, and let silence hang like a noose. The smell of roses thickened as she drew closer, filling the air until breathing hurt. She brushed Anna's cheek with the bouquet, smiling. "My wedding night is no place for secrets," she said softly, dangerously. Anna flinched, her tears spilling now, her voice gone. I stood frozen, torn between shielding her and surrendering. My daughter's eyes stayed locked on mine, daring me. For a moment, I thought Anna might scream. Her throat tightened, her hands shook, but no sound came. My daughter leaned in, her lips almost touching Anna's ear. Whatever she whispered was too soft for me to catch, but the effect was clear. Anna's shoulders collapsed, and her eyes fell to the floor. She nodded once, broken. The roses brushed past me as my daughter swept away. Anna looked at me then, her face pale as death. "You don't understand," she whispered, voice cracking. "It's already too late." She turned and fled down the hall, disappearing into the dark. I tried to follow, but the music inside swelled, a burst of celebration that drowned her footsteps. When I reached the end of the hall, she was gone. I stood alone in the dim corridor, my chest heaving, my head spinning. My hand brushed against the wall for balance, the plaster cold, grounding. Behind me, the music and laughter continued, oblivious to the storm gathering beneath it. I closed my eyes, replaying Anna's broken words, her trembling grip, my daughter's roses cutting across the silence. When I opened them again, the contract was still in my pocket, burning like fire, heavier than stone. My wife's warning echoed, Anna's terror lingered, and in my mind, the deadline ticked closer, closer, closer. Midnight felt unbearable already, but 10 o'clock tomorrow. That would decide everything. And as the thought clawed through me, the sound came. 3 sharp knocks on the door at the end of the corridor. The knocks echoed down the corridor, hollow and final, each one vibrating through my chest like a verdict. I froze, hand against the wall, staring at the closed door as if it might burst open. But nothing came, just silence, thick and suffocating. My throat tightened, and I backed away, step by step, until the light from the ballroom swallowed me again. Yet the sound clung to me as though the door had knocked against my own skull. I returned to the hall, trying to blend back into the illusion of celebration. The music blared louder now, trumpets and violins competing, drowning my thoughts. People laughed, raised their glasses, oblivious. But I couldn't stop watching her. My daughter moving through the crowd like a queen, the purse clutched in her hand, never leaving her side. Every time she brushed against someone, I imagined the vial inside clinking softly, mocking me. At one point, she set the purse on a chair near the edge of the dance floor. Careless, almost arrogant. My pulse spiked, my body moving before thought could stop me. I slipped across the room, weaving through guests, and reached it. The zipper was undone, fabric gaping open just enough to reveal shadows inside. My hand hovered, sweat gathering in my palm. What would I find if I dared? The music surged at that moment, a violin shrieking, covering the small rasp of fabric as I pulled it wider. My breath caught. Inside, a small glass vial lay nestled between makeup and tissues, half empty. The liquid glimmered faintly under the chandelier's glow, sharp fumes rising as I leaned closer. It wasn't just wine I had tasted earlier. This was stronger, unnatural, meant to silence or control. My chest tightened, lungs burning as if the smell alone could drug me. I jerked back, glancing around to make sure no one had seen. Guests twirled and laughed, lost in the music. My wife caught my eye from across the room, her face pale, her head shaking in warning. She mouthed, "Not here!" The urge to hide the vial fought with the terror of being caught touching it. I shoved it back inside, clumsy, hands shaking. My skin felt tainted, the cold glass imprint still lingering on my fingertips. I zipped the purse shut, forcing it to look untouched, and stepped away as though nothing had happened. But my heart betrayed me, hammering so loud I feared the guests could hear. I grabbed a glass of water, gulping it down, though it did nothing to wash away the chemical ghost in my throat. My daughter noticed. She paused mid-dance, her smile freezing as her eyes flicked to the purse, then to me. For a second, suspicion flared, sharp, dangerous. She tilted her head, her bouquet spinning lazily in her hand, and her lips curved into a smaller, colder smile. She knew, or at least she suspected. And the realization struck me harder than the taste of that cursed liquid. I sat, body rigid, trying to mask the panic clawing at me. My wife leaned close, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "Sedative," she said, her breath trembling. My head snapped toward her. She nodded once, eyes wet, voice breaking. "Not poison. A sedative." "To make you sign." Relief and horror twisted together inside me, each battling for dominance. They hadn't wanted me dead, just powerless. The truth was worse than death. It meant conspiracy, planning, betrayal that stretched deeper. My daughter hadn't raised a glass to kill me. She had raised it to take everything I had built, everything I had kept alive through decades of sacrifice. My name, my home, my very authority as a man, all signed away under the fog of that vial. The humiliation cut deeper than poison ever could. I turned to my wife, desperate for more. "How do you know?" My voice cracked. She squeezed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "Because I saw her buy it. Weeks ago. She doesn't know I know." My stomach dropped. Weeks. Not a whim, not a mistake. Planned betrayal, rehearsed like the steps of her wedding dance. My blood boiled, but my body sat still, trapped by fear of exposure. My daughter returned to our table, bouquet crushed from her grip, smile too wide. She brushed my shoulder with the roses, perfume clinging like smoke. "You didn't finish your drink, father," she said, tone playful but eyes piercing. I forced a laugh, weak, brittle. Too strong for me tonight. She leaned closer, lips brushing my ear. "Then tomorrow will be harder." And she drifted away again, leaving the words to rot in me. The contract in my jacket weighed heavier with every passing minute, Now I knew why they had wanted it signed under sedation. My forged name already waited at the bottom, but unfinished, incomplete. Tomorrow at 10, with police at the bar, the pressure would corner me into obedience. Every path was closing, every breath tightening. My only weapon was hesitation, and even that wouldn't last. I stared at the purse again, imagining ripping it open, shattering the vial on the floor, exposing her before everyone. The fantasy gave me strength for a heartbeat, until I pictured the laughter, the whispers, the accusations of madness. They would call me senile, paranoid, a drunk old man embarrassing his daughter on her wedding night. Silence, once again, seemed the safer prison. The night dragged, every song, every toast, every laugh cutting deeper. Midnight loomed like a guillotine, and Anna's words replayed endlessly in my head. It was her who, the confession still unfinished, buried under roses and fear. I clenched my fists, nails carving crescents into my palms. Tomorrow at 10, the truth would surface. But tonight, I was drowning in secrets. And then I saw it. My daughter leaving the dance floor, purse swinging at her side, her eyes never leaving me. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her steps were slower, heavier, as if she was carrying more than a vial inside that small bag. She walked toward me with deliberate calm, each step echoing through my bones. I braced myself, knowing she was about to demand the one thing I couldn't yet give: obedience. She stood in front of me, the purse tight against her ribs, bouquet wilting in her other hand. The chatter of guests blurred, their laughter muffled, as if the hall itself was holding its breath. She bent slightly, close enough that I could see the faint smear of lipstick on her teeth. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "you'll sign, and no one will ever doubt your love for me." The words cut deeper than any insult, laced with threat and mock affection. When I returned home that night, the contract burned against my chest like a hidden ember. I pulled it out under the yellow glow of the lamp, the paper edges rough against my trembling hands. My name was there, scrawled at the bottom, but it wasn't mine. The forgery was clumsy yet bold, as though confidence could replace authenticity. My breath caught. The page above it, the signature page, was incomplete, the space for confirmation still blank. I ran my fingers across the ink, smudging slightly, feeling the theft in every stroke. Rage welled in me, heavy and sharp, but it carried nowhere, no outlet. To shout would invite disbelief. To reveal would invite ruin. My wife sat beside me, silent, her face half hidden by shadow. She didn't ask what I held. She didn't need to. Her trembling hand touched mine, grounding me, but also begging me not to explode. The house around us seemed different, smaller, as if the paper had already stolen its walls. Every creak in the wood, every flicker of the lamp felt like proof of fragility. This was the home my father had built, brick by brick, roof repaired by my own hands in storms, floors polished by years of sacrifice. Now a stranger's hand threatened to erase it with a pen. How could my daughter conspire against the very blood that raised her? I laid the contract on the table, smoothing it out with shaking palms. The smell of ink lingered, harsh and artificial, carrying the weight of deception. I wanted to tear it into pieces, feed it to the fire, watch every lie curl into smoke. But I couldn't. Destroying it would destroy the proof. And proof was all I had left. Proof that I hadn't surrendered. That they had forced this hand. Proof that tomorrow at 10, I might still fight. The clock in the hallway struck 2, each chime heavy as iron against the silence. My wife finally spoke, voice hoarse, words trembling. "If you sign, we lose everything. If you don't, they'll ruin you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She had already cried enough in the years before, in nights of hunger, in mornings of unpaid bills. I knew the sound of her withheld sobs better than my own breath. I pressed my head into my hands, the paper whispering beneath my elbows. The memory of my daughter as a child flashed, her small hand tugging my sleeve, begging for coins to buy ice cream, her laughter echoing as she skipped ahead on the street. That image collided with the woman from tonight, bouquet of roses turned into a blade, her voice silk and steel. How had she become someone I could no longer recognize? The weight of decision hung over me, unbearable. Every option carried loss. Sign, and I would lose my dignity, my home, my history. Refuse, and they would smear me in public, strip me with lies, laugh as I begged. Tomorrow's morning loomed closer, ticking toward 10 like a death knell, and all I could do was sit in the half-dark, clutching a contract that carried my name, but not my hand. The night air seeped in through the cracked window, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. I stared at the contract, then at the fireless grate, imagining it burning to ash. But the truth demanded weight, demanded paper, demanded ink. I folded it carefully again, slid it back into my jacket pocket. It pressed against me like a wound, reminding me every breath that I wasn't free. As the clock struck 3, my eyes finally closed, though sleep never came. My body stayed rigid in the chair, listening for every sound, every whisper of movement outside. And when the knock finally came, sharp against the door, my chest locked. I didn't move, didn't breathe, but I knew. The night wasn't finished with me yet, and the paper was only the beginning. The pounding at the door grew harder, 3 strikes that rattled the frame as if the wood might splinter. My wife startled awake, clutching her shawl tight against her chest, eyes wide with fear. I rose slowly, each step heavy, the contract pressing like a stone against my ribs. When I opened the door, the cold night air rushed in, carrying the sharp scent of rain and gasoline. A courier stood there, soaked to the bone, holding an envelope sealed with a smear of red wax. He shoved it into my hand without a word, his eyes avoiding mine, his breath fogging the air. "Deliver funds tomorrow at 10, or legal action begins," he muttered, as though rehearsed. Then he turned, vanishing into the waiting dark, where headlights glowed faintly. Through the drizzle, I caught sight of the car, my son-in-law's outline behind the wheel, cigarette ember glowing. In the passenger seat, her silhouette, my daughter, sat motionless, staring straight at me. The envelope felt heavier than it should, the wax seal rough under my thumb. I closed the door with a shudder, leaning against it as if the wood might hold me upright. My wife whispered, "What is it?" But I couldn't answer. Instead, I tore it open under the dim light. Inside was a demand. Numbers scribbled in ink, the debt precise, the deadline bold. 10 o'clock. Always 10. The hour had become a noose tightening around my neck. I laid the papers on the table, smoothing them with trembling hands. The figures blurred before my eyes, my breath catching. This wasn't just a request. It was extortion dressed as legality. My wife pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. "They'll take everything," she whispered. I nodded, though the truth already weighed heavier than her words. The house, the savings, the last fragments of dignity, all hanging by a single morning. The rain outside tapped against the window like impatient fingers, steady and cruel. I stared out into the night, the car still waiting, exhaust clouding the air. My daughter hadn't moved, her face turned toward the house. I imagined her eyes locked on mine, daring me, measuring how far I would bend before breaking. My wife tugged at my sleeve, her voice small. "Don't open the curtains. Don't let them see you afraid." But fear was already etched into me. My chest tightened as I pressed a hand against the glass, the cold seeping into my skin. I thought of the napkin in my pocket, red stains still stiff, proof of something darker than debt. I thought of the vial in the purse, the sedative fumes clinging to my memory. And now, this envelope. Each piece building the same puzzle. Silence me, strip me, erase me. My daughter's wedding wasn't celebration. It was a crime scene wrapped in silk and roses. I turned back to the table, the contract and demand letter side by side, twin daggers pointed at my chest. My wife sat across from me, shoulders slumped, her hands folded like a prayer. "You can't sign," she said firmly, though her voice cracked at the edges. I looked at her and wanted to believe I still had that strength. But tomorrow, the crowd, the law, the deadline, they would all demand a show. And I, the fool, was the star of the spectacle. The clock ticked past 1, each second louder than the last. My body ached with exhaustion, yet my mind refused rest. I thought of Anna, her whisper cut short, her terror palpable. She had known something, enough to risk warning me. But where was she now? Had she been silenced? Was she hiding, waiting, or already erased from the story? The questions gnawed at me, each one sharper than the last. I gathered the papers, slipping them into a drawer, but the sound of the wood scraping was too loud in the silence. My wife flinched, as though expecting another knock. Instead, the night returned to quiet, the rain steady, the car still humming outside. I felt like prey in my own home, every wall thinner, every shadow deeper. Even the lamp seemed to flicker with suspicion, throwing shapes across the floor that twisted as I moved. At last, headlights flared, cutting across the room through the curtains. The car pulled away slowly, engine low, taunting. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, sagging into the chair. But relief was false. Their retreat was only the tightening of the rope, giving slack before the final pull. Tomorrow at 10, they would strike clean, with signatures, with debts, with lies dressed as truth. My wife touched my arm again, her voice no more than a whisper. "We have to fight." I wanted to answer, to promise her something, anything, but words failed. I stared at the empty glass on the table, the rim still faintly red from the wine I hadn't swallowed. Proof of restraint, proof of suspicion, proof of survival. Yet no one else would see it as proof. They would see it as paranoia, the ramblings of an old man out of his depth. The rain slowed, the night grew heavier, and silence pressed in until I felt buried alive. I closed my eyes. The image of my daughter's silhouette still burned behind them. She hadn't looked away. Not once. I whispered to myself, too softly for anyone else to hear, "Tomorrow, I'll make them see." But even as I said it, my chest sank with dread, because deep down I knew tomorrow was already theirs, and all I had left was the fear of how far they'd go to claim it. I didn't sleep. Not really. My body sagged in the chair, but my mind spun in circles until dawn cracked through the curtains, pale and merciless. The papers lay on the table where I had left them, a reminder that every breath I took belonged to their deadline. 10 o'clock. I rubbed my temples, trying to silence the echo, but it only grew louder, sharper, like bells tolling my own end. When the first text messages arrived, it was like a fresh wound being cut open. Guests had begun sending photos from the wedding, little glimpses of joy that felt like evidence now. I opened one, then another, scrolling with trembling fingers. Laughter frozen in time, arms raised in toasts, couples twirling. And then, in the corner of one frame, my stomach lurched. The family doctor, watching from the crowd. He wasn't a guest, not truly. So why had he been there? I zoomed in, squinting. His eyes weren't on the bride or the groom or the guests. They were locked on me, or rather, on my glass. A chill crawled down my spine, colder than the night air had been. He hadn't been smiling. He hadn't been clapping. He had been studying, waiting, like a man observing a trial rather than a celebration. My pulse stuttered as realization clawed its way into me. He knew. I dropped the phone onto the table, the clatter startling my wife awake. She rubbed her eyes, muttered something soft, then followed my gaze. "Who is that?" she asked, squinting at the photo. I swallowed hard, throat dry. The doctor. Her face tightened, and she leaned closer, studying the image. Why would he be there? The question echoed my own fear, but no answer came. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. The memory sharpened. The moment of the toast, the doctor's face somewhere behind the crowd, his gaze drilling into me. He had seen me hesitate. He had seen me sip, but not swallow. Did he know what was in the glass? Or worse, had he been the one who supplied it? The thought twisted my gut. A doctor's oath was to heal, but money, alliances, power, those could rot any promise. I paced the room, the floorboards creaking under my steps. "I have to see him," I muttered, mostly to myself. My wife rose, pulling her shawl tighter. "This is madness. They'll know you're moving. They'll watch." Her fear was real, her body trembling, but my decision had already taken root. Waiting until 10 would mean surrender, but finding the doctor before the deadline, that might mean survival, or at least answers. I gathered the papers, contract, debt demand, the damned envelope, and shoved them into my jacket. My wife tried to stop me, clutching my arm with surprising strength. And if he's part of it, what then? Her eyes searched mine, begging for certainty I didn't have. "Then I'll know," I said, voice low. The truth might destroy me, but ignorance already had me halfway in the grave. The streets outside were slick with last night's rain, the air smelling of wet asphalt and rust. Each step toward his office felt heavier, as though the city itself resisted my movement. Cars passed, horns blaring, people rushing to work, unaware that my entire life was balanced on the edge of a single hour. I checked my watch, 8:47. Barely more than an hour left before the noose tightened completely. When I reached his office building, the glass doors loomed tall and polished, reflecting my gaunt face back at me. My reflection looked like a ghost, hollow eyes, shoulders bent under weight, invisible to everyone else. I pushed the doors open, the smell of disinfectant hitting me instantly, sharp and sterile. It mingled with the faint hum of fluorescent lights, a sound too clean, too false. My palms dampened with sweat as I approached the receptionist's desk. She looked up, startled. "Do you have an appointment?" I shook my head, voice raw. "Tell him it's urgent. Tell him it's life or death." She frowned, clearly unconvinced, but something in my eyes must have broken her hesitation. She picked up the phone, whispering quickly, then pointed me toward the waiting area. My knees nearly buckled as I lowered myself into a chair, the leather cold, unforgiving. The minutes dragged, each second marked by the clock on the wall ticking like a hammer. I clutched my jacket, the papers inside rustling softly, as if reminding me of their weight. 9:12, 9:18. My pulse climbed with each passing moment. Finally, the office door creaked open, and the doctor appeared, his white coat immaculate, his expression unreadable. He gestured silently for me to follow. As I rose, my legs weak, one thought thundered through my head, louder than the ticking, louder than my own breath. By the time the clock struck 10, I would either have proof in my hand or the final betrayal carved into my chest. His office smelled of antiseptic and old books, a mixture that made my stomach turn. The blinds were half closed, slats of gray light striping across the floor. He moved slowly, deliberately, closing the door behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than a gunshot. I stood there, every nerve on fire, waiting for him to speak. But he didn't. He just studied me, eyes cool, hands folded behind his back. Finally, I broke the silence, my voice hoarse. "Why were you there? At the wedding? Watching?" The words came out like accusations, like pleas. He didn't flinch. Instead, he walked to his desk, pulled open a drawer, and placed a small file on the surface. "Because I had to know," he said calmly. My pulse quickened. "Know what?" I demanded. His eyes flicked up, steady and unblinking. "If you would drink it." The room tilted slightly, my knees threatening to give way. I gripped the chair beside me, the wood biting into my palm. "So you knew," I whispered. He nodded once, without hesitation. "It wasn't poison." His tone was factual, almost cold. "It was a sedative. Enough to cloud your judgment. Enough to make your signature easy. Nothing more." My breath caught, anger and relief colliding, tearing at me from inside. I sank into the chair, head spinning. The words echoed. Not poison. My wife had been right. But the truth was no comfort. It meant my daughter hadn't wanted me dead, just erased in another way. Alive, but powerless. Breathing, but stripped of everything I had built. My chest tightened, shame biting deeper than fear. The thought that she had chosen this over love hollowed me out. The doctor slid the file closer, his fingers lingering on the edge. I had the sample tested, from the bottle she carried. I stared at him, disbelief mingling with dread. He opened the folder, revealing a thin sheet with typed results, numbers I couldn't decipher. But the bold letters at the top told me enough. Benzodiazepine compound. My heart lurched. Proof. Evidence that the glass had been meant to break me, not kill me. My voice shook as I asked, "Why are you showing me this? If you were with them, you'd keep it hidden." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Because I am not with them. I treated your wife years ago. I know what you've endured to hold this family together, and I cannot stand by while they strip you bare." His words landed heavy, like a lifeline and a warning at once. I swallowed hard, throat burning. "So it was him," I said, the words tearing free. "My son-in-law?" The doctor's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. He reached into the folder again, pulling out another page. The handwriting on the forged contract. "It isn't your daughter's. It's his. She was the face, but not the hand." The truth slammed into me, shattering what little remained of certainty. My daughter, pawn or accomplice? Which one was she? I leaned forward, gripping the file, my hands shaking as I scanned the lines. Proof. Real proof. Something I could place on a table, something no one could deny. But even as the relief surged, it soured. Because now I knew my daughter's role wasn't as clean as innocence. She had let it happen. She had lifted the glass, pressed it into my hand, whispered the words. Even if she hadn't written the lie, she had worn it like a crown. The doctor's voice cut through my thoughts. "You need to move before 10. They will not wait. They'll corner you with witnesses, papers, and the police." "This," he tapped the folder, "is your shield. Use it." I nodded slowly, though my chest burned with doubt. Could a single folder undo the trap they had woven? Or would it crumble under the weight of their power? I stood, clutching the file, my body trembling with the weight of choice. The office seemed smaller now, the walls pressing in. The doctor's gaze followed me, steady, unyielding. "Don't hesitate," he warned. "Hesitation is how they win." His words echoed as I stepped toward the door, the file pressed hard against my chest, as if it could keep my heart from shattering. Outside, the hallway stretched long and sterile, the hum of lights buzzing like a wasp nest. Each step felt heavier, the folder cutting into my ribs, the contract still hidden in my jacket like a second blade. Pawn or accomplice? My daughter's face haunted me, roses brushing my cheek, her whisper burning my ear. I couldn't decide which truth hurt worse, that she was victim of her husband's scheme, or that she had chosen it willingly. As I pushed open the exit door, sunlight struck my face, harsh and blinding. My watch read 9:43, 17 minutes until the deadline. My hands tightened on the file, my breath ragged. For the first time all night, I felt the path clear. I would walk into that room with proof, with truth, with fire. But as I stepped onto the street, a figure moved across the road, blocking my path. My daughter, standing there, alone, her eyes locked on mine. She stood in the middle of the street, the morning sun behind her turning her veil into a halo. For a moment, she looked like a vision of innocence, the child I once knew, hands clasped as if she still needed me to guide her across. But her eyes, those betrayed everything. They were cold, sharp, carrying none of the warmth I remembered. My chest tightened. The folder pressed against my ribs reminded me why I was there, and why she couldn't stop me now. We entered the hall where the meeting had been arranged, lawyers already waiting, papers stacked like weapons. The room smelled of polished wood and coffee gone cold, an odd mix of civility and threat. My son-in-law sat at the head of the table, confident, his smirk carved deep. He gestured toward the empty chair meant for me. "Sit, Father. Let's end this quickly." My daughter took her place beside him, hands folded neatly, avoiding my gaze. I lowered myself into the chair, slow, deliberate. My wife sat at my side, her hand slipping into mine, trembling but firm. I placed the contract on the table first, letting them see the forgery. My name stolen, my dignity mocked. He chuckled, shaking his head as though I were a confused old man clinging to paranoia. "We've been through this," he said smoothly. "The signature stands." The lawyers nodded, some already jotting notes, ready to bury me. That was when I pulled out the folder. The air seemed to shift as I laid it open, the doctor's results staring back in bold letters. Sedative compound detected. Gasps broke the silence, the shuffle of chairs loud as thunder. I slid the page toward the lawyers, their pens stopping mid-word. My son-in-law's smirk faltered, his jaw tightening as he leaned forward, trying to snatch the file. But I held it firm, letting everyone see the panic bloom across his face. My daughter finally looked at me then, and the blood drained from hers. She hadn't known. I saw it in the tremor of her lips, the way her fingers tightened on the edge of the table. She whispered, almost to herself, "You told me it was nothing." The words shattered the last illusion, exposing the crack in their perfect facade. For a fleeting second, she wasn't the enemy. She was the pawn. My chest ached with the weight of that truth. The lawyer nearest to me cleared his throat, voice unsteady. This changes everything. If coercion was involved, these documents are invalid." My son-in-law slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing through the room. "Lies! He's desperate, senile." His voice rose, frantic now, betraying the calm he had clung to. Eyes turned, whispers spread, and I realized for the first time that the room was no longer his. The tide had shifted. I placed the final piece on the table. The photograph from the wedding. The doctor's eyes locked on my glass. He saw it. He tested it. And the signature. I jabbed a finger at the forged page. "Is your hand, not mine, not hers." Silence followed, thick, suffocating, until one of the lawyers spoke. "We'll need handwriting verification. But this," he tapped the file, "is damning." My son-in-law's face flushed crimson, sweat beading at his temple. My wife straightened beside me, her voice finally breaking free, strong despite the tremor. "You tried to strip him of everything. But now everyone sees what you are." Her words sliced the room sharper than any evidence. My daughter covered her face with both hands, tears spilling through her fingers. The bouquet she had carried yesterday lay wilted in the corner, forgotten, its perfume now only a memory of betrayal. I leaned back, exhaustion flooding me, but also something else, a fragile relief I hadn't felt in years. For once, truth had teeth. It had clawed its way out, against the lies, against the threats, against the shame. My daughter sobbed quietly, broken pieces of her mask littering the table. My son-in-law shouted still, his words losing power with every syllable, until even the lawyers looked at him as if he were a stranger, unraveling before their eyes. One of the senior lawyers gathered the papers into a neat stack, his tone final. This will be investigated. Until then, all actions are suspended. No property transfers, no legal claims. The gavel might as well have struck right there, though no judge sat in the room. The evidence had spoken louder than any oath. My chest loosened for the first time in days. Not victory yet, but survival. Survival was enough. I turned my gaze toward my daughter. She lowered her hands, mascara streaked across her cheeks, eyes red and swollen. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice cracked. "I thought it was just formality. I thought—" Her words crumbled, unfinished, the truth too heavy to carry. My heart twisted. To forgive or not? That decision lingered, sharp and unsolved. She was still my blood, but her silence had almost buried me alive. As the meeting broke apart, voices rising, chairs scraping, I sat frozen in my seat. My hands rested on the folder, the papers that had saved me, at least for now. Around me, the storm had shifted, but its debris was everywhere. Trust shattered, love broken, truth sharp and merciless. I closed my eyes, hearing her sobs, his curses, the lawyer's murmurs. Justice wasn't mine to take, but it had begun to unravel them. And tomorrow would demand the hardest answer. Could I ever forgive?